half of all Republicans support raising the minimum wage. The problem is Republicans in Congress oppose raising the minimum wage. Now, I don't know if that's just because I proposed it.
That was President Obama in Connecticut today, stopped near Hartford to push a minimum wage increase. You heard some of his arguments why. But this could be a problem issue for the GOP. Voters support a minimum wage hike by a 2-to-1 margin, and half say they'd be more likely to vote for a candidate who supports a higher minimum wage. That was the biggest needle-moving issue in a recent poll. Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says a $10.10 minimum wage would raise the earnings for 16.5 million workers, but it would cut the workforce by 500,000 jobs over time. There may be other benefits. Left-leaning Center for American Progress says the Obama minimum wage would cut food stamp spending by more than $4.5 billion a year. Finally, this factoid we found from the Low-Income Housing Coalition. To pay for an average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, minimum wage worker in New York has to work 139 hours. That's more than 3 weeks worth of a 40-hour work week. In New Jersey, it's 137 hours. It's 113 in Connecticut. Obi, why don't Republicans just put the white flag up on this one, support an increase in the minimum wage, and get this potential political monkey off their backs?
I think if you're going to do it, why don't you make it $100 an hour? Why not just raise it all the way up there and take care of it?
But that's inane, and everybody knows it is.
Well,
I mean,
$10 is
$10 is actually in the curve from inflation from where it was in the 60s.
It's not necessary, and I think one of the things that doesn't come out in the campaign world, so to speak, in the political world, is that this does nothing for the middle class. This also hurts our children that want to get jobs when they're getting out there. You can't just say, hey, pay everybody a higher rate, and therefore every business that wants to hire anybody has to charge the consumers more for everything they've got too. You want to start having to pay more for your milk, your bread, your movie tickets, and everything else you do, your dry cleaning. Is that what you want to do?
When you say it does nothing for the middle class, elaborate. What do you mean?
The minimum wage is not the middle.
Anyway, but you know.
But do you want it to go up more?
Well,
but it's like the cost of a Whopper or a Big Mac goes up like 15 cents, if that. I mean, it's pretty minimal around.
Well, no, because the other part of this is the unions want to unionize those areas too. In New York City, you're not just talking minimum wage now too. You're also talking mandatory sick pay that they've already passed in New York City. So at what point are you going to stop passing on cost to anybody that operates a business? Every single time when you're paying somebody for an extra week of the year for 6 days at this point.
But it's so.
you know, go ahead.
Go.
You know, this is one of those areas where I shake my head only because there has been such relentlessly bad news for people who are in the poorest, you know, echelon of this country. And there's been only great news for the richest people. And I'm not a class warrior or anything like that. But I got to tell you, I don't know how people live on $7. What is it, $7.25 an hour, something like that?
But
How do you do it?
It was never intended. That's exactly my point.
Well,
it wasn't intended to be able to pay the rent for a 2-bedroom apartment.
And I'm not, you know, suggesting that the world owes everybody a middle class existence. That's not the way the world works. But you gotta let.
No,
I mean,
I agree with you.
How many raises in the minimum wage have there been in 15 years? 2, I think.
I think it is
Federal.
2.
I agree with you. Nobody's owed anything. But with all due respect to my great friend OB here, what you've heard for the last 3 minutes is exactly why the president was in Hartford pushing increase to the minimum wage. If Republicans make that argument, they will lose in these midterm elections. It's almost like a prehistoric argument that they're making. No one's paying attention to it anymore. And it's sad that they get to decide the fate of Americans, and it's like, they get theirs, and everybody else is on their own.
It feels like, and we got about a minute left, but it feels like...
Meaning the party.
We're talking about a debate between who you're going to support, workers or business owners, and the job creators that we heard so much about in the 2012 election. I don't know if there's enough attention being paid to workers. Why do you need a
federal minimum wage? Deal with it on the state level. Why should the same minimum wage, whether you're in Iowa, Illinois, California, New York, or Hartford? You don't need a federal minimum wage at this point. You have the states can set their own minimum wage, and then the other challenge on this in New York State right now is you've got de Blasio saying he wants his own minimum wage for New York City. How are you going to have something on the borders here of Westchester County where we sit and the Bronx and have 2 different minimum wages? And how are you going to deliver goods from Westchester to the Bronx and say when you're in the Bronx you're paying more for minimum wage? What does that do?
Well, de Blasio wants New York City to be a separate state. I mean, there's, he's really moving in that direction. But I just look at the McDonald's CEO who puts out a booklet on how you can live on $7.25 an hour, and I think, you know what? Why don't you live on $7.25 an hour?
Right.
You know,
Right. Look at his salary.
The arrogance of this position is just
arrogance.
You know,
arrogance.
Whatever.
And is that what it's about?
Let them eat Big Macs.
Right. Right.
We'll be
And
right
die
back
in
to
30
wrap up
days.
RFL after this.